Welcome to the Adventurous Minds podcast, examining fitness and wellness through the lens of outdoor sport and adventure.
What's up, Adventurous Minds? It's your host, Timmy Summers, and I'm so excited to start off the podcast with someone that I share my own name with, Timmy O'Neal. I first came across Timmy a few years ago watching one of my favorite movies, 180 Degrees South. Timmy is a legendary rock climber. He's been all over the world in pursuit of big mountains and steep walls. Timmy is also the co-founder of Paradox Sports, which is a nonprofit dedicated to getting disabled people into the outdoors and experiencing adventure sports. He does so much, it's really hard to summarize in just a quick intro. So please enjoy this conversation. We talk about everything from where he came from to where he is today. Have a listen and let me know what you think. All right. Timmy, thanks so much for coming on. It is a pleasure to finally get you on here.
My pleasure. And then, we share something in common other than rock climbing, and that is the first name, Timmy, right? And so that's like this playful name. So I do want to do a little deep dive into our name and how people perceive, because people are called Tommy, and that's cool, right?
But not Timmy.
But Timmy is like suddenly, and is it because of Lassie? And Timmy falling in that well, and Timmy being this like not only a childlike name, playful, but maybe sort of ignorant, incapacitated. I don't know, Timmy.
So I've really struggled with this because I'm a junior. My dad's name is Tim, and so he's Tim, which is why I was Timmy. And I got to college, and I was like, all right, like I guess I'm becoming an adult. Like I need to put to bed Timmy and become Tim, and I tried to do it. Like I really tried for like 2 months. I was introducing myself as Tim. I was like, I can't do this. Like I'm not Tim. Like I'm gonna make the conscious decision to stay as Timmy. And it is funny though. It's like people don't want to call you that.
No, they're uncomfortable around the name Timmy because they expect it to be a child. And then if it's a child, then maybe they need to feed that child, find that child's parents. Maybe, God forbid, they have to change that child. That's not the case at all for me, at least. I'm not sure about you about that. But anyway, yeah, I'm excited to be here and talking with you.
Yeah.
Now we got that.
I haven't spoken to anyone with the best name in the world other than you, so this is a first.
And then, of course, it's Timothy only when you've done something bad. Like, Timothy, get in here, right? Timothy.
No, I know I'm in trouble when I hear Timothy. It's not good news. So you're from the East Coast. You're from Pennsylvania, which is pretty cool. And when I was first like kind of doing research on you, I saw that when you did like a semester at Temple before you kind of jetted off to the West Coast in search of a big rock.
Yeah, I did a year at Temple, which I called 13th grade. And I paid for that year of college myself from being a roofer for a year before that. So I was like, okay, the trades, not great for me, right? Especially roofer, it's a difficult job through the summers and muggy summers in the East Coast. And then I was like, okay, I got to get to school. That's definitely going to be the ticket. And then I did 13th grade. And I'm like, no way. And then I saw a National Geographic magazine that said park employee fleeing the fires of 1988 as a caption. And I'm like, park employee? That's got to be way better to get a job in Yellowstone than having my current job, which I was a roofer again. So then I jumped on a Greyhound bus and headed to Yellowstone. And that changed the trajectory of my life positively and permanently. The national parks basically saved my life.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of share that a little bit because growing up in DC, my mom's from California, but when college came around, I was like, all right, I need to get out of the East Coast. I'm only applying to like West Coast schools. I want to be outdoors. I want to climb. I want to surf. I want to ski, like all these different things. And so I went to UC Santa Cruz, but I only lasted about 2 years myself. I don't know, all these different avenues were kind of inviting me, and it's like sitting in a classroom, even in beautiful Santa Cruz, it just didn't feel quite right. So I fully get it. So when you left Pennsylvania and you're on your way to Yosemite, were you going in pursuit of climbing, or was that something you discovered along the way, or was it another motivator?
Well, going to Yellowstone, which was the first place I went to.
Yellowstone. Sorry.
Yeah, I went to Yellowstone, and I went there on a lark. I called the park, and I talked to the national park, and they're like, "Well, we can't give you a job. This is the park system. Call this number, the concessionaire. Like they run the hotels, the gift shops, etc." So I called them. They go, "We can't give you a job on the phone, but we can guarantee you a job when you arrive because there's such turnover." It was the summer. I arrived, got a job at the Old Faithful Inn. Location, geysers would erupt, the bison, the prismatic springs. My backyard was this immense wilderness. And it turned me on to like this whole idea of outside without urban development around it, which is what Philadelphia was my entire life. And then my roommate comes home and he's like, "Dude, there's a free climbing clinic in Bozeman, Montana." I'm like, "Well, you had me at free and you nailed it with climbing." Then we went there and I tried climbing for my first time ever. And the guy's like, "Hey, you're okay at this." I'm like, "Oh no, I'm great." And he goes, I'll take you multi-pitch climbing. And so we went and did that. And then a few days later, and I'm like, "Wow, this is what I want to be doing for the rest of my life." And someone's like, "You got to get to Yosemite then." And that next summer, I went and worked in Yosemite National Park in California. And that's when I did the deepest dive into climbing. And that was it. I'm like, okay, this is living, the best life for me. So that was it.
So you kind of discovered climbing a little bit later in life. It's not like you were climbing from a super young age.
Well, I was climbing buildings and bridges and trees really early. And in fact, the Fernwood Cemetery right outside of Philly is where I grew up. And that was our idea of open space. Everybody dying to get in. And so we would climb the tombstones, and I was the only one who could climb the unclimbable tombstones. So my like brothers and friends, and so I was into it, and I had a capacity, but I had never tried it until I was 19. Then I was 20 in Yosemite, and then somebody's like, "Dude, you should check out Joshua Tree in Southern California." And as you probably have been there, there's no services, no electricity, no water. It's like Backo Beyond, very primitive and wild. And I had met my tribe. Everyone I had met there was unlike anyone I'd ever met before, but they were just like me. And I went into the deep dirtbag mode for the next 7 years of my life. Like eat, breathe, sleep, climbing, nothing else. The freest and most unfettered my life has ever been was those early years.
And was that like a conscious decision when you were like, all right, this is the career that I'm going to go down, or this is maybe not career, but this is what I'm going to do with my life? Is that, or were you just taking every day like, all right, this is what I'm going to do today?
It was so in the moment. I mean, it was hand to mouth, right? Like we would walk the campsite there, at Hidden Valley Campground with a spoon in our pocket. And then you'd show up and look for the LAers with the fat coolers and the spreads and you go, "Hey, what's going on?" You'd use your spoon to point the climbs out, and next thing you know, they're inviting you over for a meal. And, there was no plan. 6 months out is as far as I would go. And really it was seasonal. Like when the weather started getting too warm, you went north. When the weather started getting too cold, you went south. And that was just in the Western US for years. It wouldn't become a job for 10 years. Before I and that was based primarily on public speaking, not necessarily my accolades and my prowess climbing. I mean, I was and remain a dedicated climber who can climb well, but it really was about recounting and describing and bringing people into my life that really allowed me to form an audience and to start working with these corporate sponsors.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I feel like a lot of people, the more people I talk to, the more I realize that's a more common story than like just your sponsors supporting you. It's kind of like the stories you have and the way that you kind of get them out there. That's really what kind of creates the career. So that makes a lot of sense. So kind of going back to Yosemite, when was the first time you actually summited El Cap? Was that, how long were you there before that happened?
Right. Great question, because you go into that valley, you've been there, and the first thing you see when you come in is you roll in, you start to see these waterfalls and these huge formations, then you come around the corner and then boom, you can't believe it. a climber's 3,000 feet. It's immensely wide and towering and sculpted by glaciers over millennia. I mean, it's so profound to be in that meadow. And of course, it's scary when you want to do something like that. You're like, oh gosh, what's that going to take? It would be years before I finally climbed El Cap.
Really?
But when I was an employee there at 20, I had a friend who climbed Half Dome, which is, this 2,000-foot wall. It stands tall at the end of the valley. It looms over you, that northwest face. It's sheer. And my friend Ralph climbed it, and he was working in the park as well. He was a night watchman, dude. What a funny job. He had like a billy club he would carry around. What are you guys doing? But he went and climbed Half Dome over 2 days. He slept on the wall, and it blew my mind. I was like, you did that? Like, how will I ever do that? Now I climb it often. I just climbed El Cap a couple weeks ago and set the age combined, oldest duo to climb the nose in a day, right, at 115 years. But toggling back 30 plus years before I would climb it, I would spend 7 days on that wall with 2 other friends. And we did the New Jersey Turnpike, aptly enough, East Coast, because there's the North American Wall, this huge diorite formation, it. And so the East Coast, they called it the New Jersey Turnpike, this independent line, heavy on the aid, so like pounding and all this stuff, and then crazy free climbing. And that would start a love affair that will never end for me with that particular monolith, the world's best known granite monolith. It's just spectacular.
I mean, it's hard for me. I didn't go to Yosemite for the first time until I was probably like 21 or 22. And I've, seen a million photos and videos and whatever of it, but it is mind blowing how big it is. It's like you cannot comprehend at all until you're standing there underneath it, looking up at it like, holy shit, this thing is huge.
And then at night, as you know, during the busy season, which is generally like spring and fall, summer too hot, but in that springtime and that fall time, there can be a constellation of headlamps up there at night. Yeah. And so during the day, it's sort of hard to pick people out, but at night you see these lights on the wall and they're not stars because the stars are up above in the firmament. So it's like this whole perspective shift. And you're like, look at all those climbers up there toiling, dude, working. And then they're setting up these portal ledges and, finally digging out their can of beans for the night. And then you wake up and repeat until you finally get to the top, right?
Yeah, I mean, that is a really interesting point, because I do remember when I was camping there and I did see headlamps at night, and I was like, wow, people are really up there. Like, this isn't just some like fairy tale thing. Like, people really climb it.
This isn't a hipster shot on Instagram, which it is now too.
So, all right. So the first time you get up it's been a few years. Was that like a pivotal moment in your climbing career? Was that it's hard to think of El Cap as like a proving ground, because it's obviously not just that, but was that like a moment for you where you're like, all right, I can take this to like a whole nother level, or were you way past that at that point?
No, exactly right. Yosemite has always been thought of as a training area, as a proving ground, as a place where you hone your skills and capacity and your courage and your belief in yourself, your belief in the unknown, essentially. Then you take that to the world's great ranges. And that's what happened. So I did that deep dive, climbed El Cap, and then it was right around, when I was 30, so like 22 years ago, that I started to do these speed climbs where we were climbing the walls fast. And it was with a dear friend of mine, Dean Potter, rest in peace. He would die in a base jumping accident in Yosemite years ago. But him and I partnered up and just blew the doors off of what was thought possible. There were these, decade standing records that hadn't been thought possible to break, and we smashed them, right? Because suddenly we were introducing less safety, basically. It was willing to take these great risks, because when you're that young and you're that capable, and it just feels right because you are so tuned in. So we were doing that, and we broke the nose record. It had been 4 hours and 20 minutes for 10 years, and we went sub 4, and then we went sub 3.5, and now it's sub 2, right, as you probably know. And then we were the first to unchain these massive formations. We did Half Dome in 2 hours. and ran all the way down and ran up Tenaya Canyon and then set the speed record on the south face of Mount Watkins, another grade 6, 2 grade 6s in a day, which had been done. Then we ran out, drove down to the nose on El Capitan and climbed that and did 3 grade 6s in under 24 hours for the first time. That's still only been done by a handful of people, but it was that type of activity and that type of explosive capacity that then allowed us as a group, this was part of a bigger group, right, to go and take that to Patagonia, southern South America, or to Greenland, or to the Himalaya, to Asia, or to Africa, or, all over the world's great ranges. And it was that getting my undergraduate in Yosemite allowed me to get my master's globally in big wall climbing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that's kind of what I wanted to get at is like, when was the shift of like, all right, we can leave the valley and go explore the rest of the world, go down to Patagonia? Was that, was that partially fueled by like having support by companies and like now you're able to go and take those like big expeditions and now you're like, you also feel ready? And where was the first like major expedition you took outside of the US?
Well, what happened was I was 30 and I was driving out to Yosemite to do this famous aid climb on El Capitan. That means where you're toiling and pounding stuff in. It's very technical, really wild and extra dangerous. And we did this famous aid climb up El Cap and we were making a film about it. And one of the filmers, Nathan Martin, was like, I'm going to Patagonia next month. And I'm like, you are? I've always wanted to go there. I've heard about this place for years. It's magical. You see these pictures of Fitzroy and Cerro Torre, and it's like huge granite teeth just gnashing the sky. And you're like, I want to go there. And he's like, I don't have a partner. You want to go? And I'm like, done. We're going. And the corporate thing would not enter my life still for a couple more years. Because the first thing you get is your friends' free stuff that they no longer need, right? It's like being on the side of a great white's mouth and you're a remora and the food that comes off, you're like snagging that. And then eventually you meet, the athlete manager and the marketing person and maybe the CEO, and they're like, hey, you're cool. And then you can enter into sort of a contract where you actually get paid to do the R&D, to represent the brand, But those first trips were still unfettered in a way by that corporate connection. And that's still kind of the way that I operate, trying just to do what it is I love to do, no matter who's paying for it. It's always like deep dirt bag, like the cheapest, the cleanest, the smallest impact, the smallest footprint, but the biggest return on the investment as far as experience. And yeah, but Patagonia was that first year in 2000 and changed my life forever once again.
And so I actually didn't know this until very recently when I was doing some research on you, but you have the first alpine ascent of Torre Eiger. Was that on one of those first trips down there? I mean, that's an unbelievable wall. Like that's pretty crazy.
Yeah, just that Cerro Torre group, for those of you listening while you're working out, and keep working out, by the way, so you can get to the Patagonia group and check this place out. But look at it online and you'll see Cerro Torre, Torre Eiger, and Cerro Stanhart, right? And that first alpine style ascent, that's exactly that commitment that I was talking about, that you hone your ability in a place like Yosemite where the weather's relatively benign. There's a grocery store, there's a really incredible search and rescue, not that you rely on that, but it's all there, allowing you to feel more comfortable, to really get good at it, so that when you go to a place like Patagonia, back go beyond, no search and rescue, no one's coming for you. The weather's atrocious. It can come in immediately and freeze you in place. So when we went for Torre Eiger, no fixed ropes, meaning no way to get down quickly. There's no retreat line. You're committing, 2 people, the rack, the pack, boom, you're going to go. We felt confident that we could do it. And that's where there's that paradigm shift. And that continues, right? Because climbing and knowledge and science and everything, it's open-ended, right? So it keeps getting pushed by that leading edge. And it's a heady, wild place to be, no matter what discipline, when you're on that leading edge.
Yeah, it sounds, I mean, I most recently watched clips from Patagonia in The Alpinist on Netflix, which is an unbelievable and tragic story.
Marc-Andre Leclerc.
Yeah, exactly. But his kind of, because he
soloed it. He soloed Troy Aikor, dude. What?
Right. I mean, I didn't even know when I was watching The Alpinist. I actually didn't know who he was, and I didn't know this story. I somehow just it didn't get to me.
Eyes, right? It's like
and I was absolutely shattered at the end. I mean, I just really didn't see it coming for some reason, because I just thought the way, they're talking about him in the present, and
he's alive. Yeah. He's alive, and then suddenly he's not, right? Like, this is so many lessons there. But still, that savage peak we unlocked, and then he would unlock the next level of being the first person alone, mostly ropeless, to get to the summit of that thing. Talk about a committed act, right? Like, wow.
Yeah, I don't. It's still hard for me to even understand any, like, the free soloing kind of nature of things. Like, I mean, I get it, but the mental space behind it. Yeah.
It's for so few people, because if most people were to try that, most people would perish immediately, right? They would have a heart attack as you're on the way to do it. Oh God, no. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, that is crazy. So, all right. So when I was young, I saw 180 degrees south, and how long, or what year was that when you were down there, and how much time had you spent in Patagonia before?
Well, I had already been there a number of times to climb in the Cerro Fitzroy, El Chalten, Argentina side. I've been to kayak in Chile, because there's a tremendous amount of incredible whitewater paddling in Chile, globally, of course, but Chile's an exceptional country for whitewater, especially in that southern region. And then 180 South was 2007, I want to say. And I got a call from Rick Ridgway, this, classic, mountaineer and filmmaker. And he's like, Timmy, and I was a Patagonia athlete at this point. That's a Patagonia driven story. And because it's, they're talking about that, legendary trip that, Yvonne Chenard, Doug Tompkins, Lito Tejeda Flores, Chris Jones do, where they drive from California all the way down to the tip of South America, surf, ski, climb Fitzroy via the California route, which is a route I still want to go and do. I absolutely want to climb the California route on Fitzroy, even though I've established a line on the west face around the corner. But he called Rick and he goes, hey, dude, you want to do this project? And I'm like, sounds good to me. So the boat had sailed, and I met them in the Galapagos, and then we sailed to Easter Island together. So I was actually on the boat when it got dismasted.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, the way that documentary films make them, rather, in the way they work, is there's only 90 minutes to tell a story. So oftentimes, people are cut out, or the story needs to be streamlined. So my best work, editing room floor. It was so fun. Like, I love the production side of things, just making it. Like, the end product, it's great. And I know it was very inspirational, and I definitely have seen it because I was at a screening, but the best parts are like being with all the filmmakers and with Jeff and the whole team and Makohe, that whole thing.
So cool. Yeah. I mean, I was just like rewatching some clips from it, and it's cool because, there's all these like old adventure films, and you can read so many books about these like epic expeditions, and it's not that they don't exist today. Like, they 100% do, but when you watch them a little further back, and you get a little bit more without the iPhone there, and without, the easy accessibility of computers and everything, that sense of adventure is just like a little bit more. And I can't help but get sucked into slightly older kind of expedition and adventure films. There's a certain feel and look to them that's just, I don't know.
Did you see Mountain of Storms? Because that's the film that 180 South borrows from for this.
No.
Travel down for this. They kind of copy the timeline of, like, chronologically what happens, and sort of, and it's called Mountain of Storms. Patagonia just re-released it for the 50th anniversary, and I toured with it to a few locations, and it's a classic. And that's really old school, it's like film and the camera,
Wait, this isn't the story of Yvonne and Doug down there,
Yeah.
right? Oh no, it is. Yes. Okay. I have seen this. Yes.
Yeah, they made a film about it. It's like an hour long or so. It's called Mountain of Storms. It's out online. You can watch it. And it just like covers them. It's like, the announcer's like, and now the men sat in the cave for over 2 months. Yvonne wasn't happy about that. But then the sun came out and he pokes his head out of the snow cave, kind of corny, but again, like harking back to 50 years ago.
Yeah, no, it's I've seen it and it's highly entertaining. It's cool to watch.
It's hilarious. Yeah. And at that point, it helps you understand that region wasn't settled like it is now. There was no town. There was like some, sheep guys down there, shepherds, in other words, like herding sheep. And that was all that was there, and then Chile and Argentina were trying to figure out how to get people in there. So when you have people inhabiting it, then you can start to draw your boundaries. But it was wild back then. Now it's like amazing. Now you go to El Chalten and there's like, the brewery and the discotheque and the internet cafe and the empanada, and you don't stay up at the mountain anymore. You stay in town, in Airbnb, and then like you get the weather report and then you charge up and go for it. And so it's made it, I think, safer to a certain degree, although climate change, now that the mountains are falling apart, it's actually a little more dangerous. But it's just different. And it's waiting. Make sure you get down there. It's incredible.
Yeah, on my I went down to Chile a couple of years ago. I didn't make it all the way down there though, so I'm hoping to do it in the next couple of years because high on my bucket list.
And then make sure you check out Torres del Paine as well, which El Chalten's in Argentina, and Torres del Paine, it looks like Towers of Pain. Torres del Paine is in Puerto Natales, and that's incredible. Chile is where it's at. Me gusta mucho este país. Yeah.
I love Chile. And my brother, who's a couple years older than me, he's a big climber and skier and everything. And he, after college, took a year off and moved down there and like lived in a van and did the whole dirtbag life. And I mean, I'm so jealous of all of his stories and photos and everything he's done. I need to do that. Maybe next year's that's the time.
Yeah, I mean, just like put it on the calendar, and like you don't need a list when you live in the bucket. So just get in the bucket and make it happen, dude.
That's a great way to think about it. So all right, so not to like jump too much time here, but I'd love to hear about kind of Paradox Sports, where that came from, and kind of like where it is. Yeah, how you got there. If you could give the listeners just some background and context, that would be awesome.
Paradox Sports is a nonprofit based in Colorado, but they do national programming and education and training around adaptive sports, but in particular, adaptive climbing. And adaptive means, say you're dealing with an amputation and you need this prosthesis or prosthetic device, or you need a special foot because you're missing your foot for an injury or cancer or what may be, or maybe it's genetics and it was in utero or so. There are many reasons that people need to adapt. In fact, we all need to adapt all the time. But then there are specific things, like say my brother, for example, he became paralyzed from the waist down when I was starting my climbing career. And him and I would eventually go on to climb El Cap several times, him doing pull-ups up the face, like thousands of pull-ups because his legs no longer worked. He broke his spine in a jump high into water, woohoo, and it ended poorly. Sadly, young men get injured. They're really bold. We talked about this earlier. So he made a mistake and it got him. And so that crisis of his paralysis became an opportunity for him to become a climber, which he did. And it also became an opportunity for me to have a parallel track in my life that I was really developing, sort of a small aperture, self-centered pursuit of becoming one of the best climbers out there. But then my brother's injury opened up this opportunity for me to work with a whole other population. So because I worked with him early, I started getting people going, hey, dude, can you help me, myself, or my brother, or my friend, or this person's rad and they have this need. So I was like always saying yes, because for me, it's about an invitation and saying yes, because it's like acupuncture for your soul, right? That word yes opens up the meridian energy's flowing. And I was able to create really meaningful exchanges early on around adaptive climbing. So Aaron Ralston, he's the guy that, lost his arm in Blue John Canyon. I helped develop his climbing prosthesis and then climb with him all over the American West. You name it, we were climbing. Another friend of mine, Warren McDonald, both legs lost in this accident where a boulder crushed him. We climbed El Cap together. Dear friend of mine, Eric Weinmayer, no light perception, one of the world's leading, visually impaired athletes. Absolutely. We climb all over the world. And the interesting thing about all these people is you get to trade in a new way of seeing the world, a new way of thinking about how your senses work, a new way of how you ask for help. So again, dealing with vulnerability, dealing with courage. And I'm learning a tremendous amount, right, from all of these exchanges. And I'm getting to do good in the world, right? So it's like the karmic boomerang is serving me well, because it's like, it's still a selfish pursuit. I still want to go and climb and do all these things, but I get to introduce this person that I may not have ever met before. They may be a dear friend to this thing that I love. So Paradox Sports became an entity when I met a guy named DJ Skelton. He was injured in the Second Fallujah War, lost the palate of his mouth, one of his eyes, mobility in an arm and a leg. He's a captain in the US Army, and he talks about post-traumatic growth. So he's like, hey, dude, I need you to come back. Actually, it was like, is this Timothy O'Neil? This is Captain Skelton from the, I was like, whoa. And then I went back to the Walter Reed Medical Center, and we did an adaptive climbing clinic for all of these wounded warriors, right? And it was magic. And we were talking later that night. I'm like, dude, you're amazing. He's like, no, dude, you're amazing. The Mutual Amazing Society. So we formed Paradox in 2007, right around when I did 180 South. It would be about 5 years later that I took the executive director role, ran it for a few years, turned it from volunteer to professional, started getting it funded, created this curriculum where we train people how to start adaptive climbing clubs. We have this whole book, and I drove all of that work and all of the funding and all the scaffolding and infrastructure to create the org as it is today. Also running new programs in the Gunks, new programs on the Teton, new programs in Yosemite, just all this great stuff. And I'm absolutely still involved in trading in the power of the possible. And last thought on that is Eric Weinmayer has a great line. What's within you is stronger than what's in your way. And that's his No Barriers organization. But that principle underlies everything in my life, and especially the work I do with Paradox Sports.
No, and that kind of saying quote is so clear from what you're doing and the people that you're helping and getting them to have these amazing experiences. And so I grew up in the whitewater community here in DC, and somewhere along the line I met Steve Fisher, the kayaker, and I ended up being an intern for him through high school and his film production company. And I was kind of putting this together, and the Dreamline project, which is a project that Steve kind of produced, and there were a lot of different people involved in it. What was his Lonnie Bedwell? So I was kind of around when when you guys were all producing that, and I was putting the pieces together today, and I was like, wow, that makes a lot of sense that you would be involved in that, because that's kind of your specialty. It's just a slightly different sport, but it also is you're an expert kayaker as well.
Right. I grew up kayaking in Philadelphia, which was an anomaly, but I paddled the entire eastern seaboard from the Ottawa all the way down to the Ocoee. So when I went out west, I took that same, risk assessment, you're always adapting when you're whitewater paddling, and all of those deep lessons I learned through kayaking, I took to climbing, and then I took those lessons and brought them to adaptive. So when Lonnie was like, hey, Eric Jackson invited me to go paddle the Zambezi because they were at the Golly Fest, and he met EJ. And I'm like, well, I'm going. I want to paddle the Zambezi. And I had already been working with Eric Weinmayer as one of his sighted kayakers on the Grand Canyon. I met Lonnie. Lonnie B is amazing. I love that dude. He is such a unique person. His mindset and the way he sees, and he's blind. So the way he sees the world and defines and determines, and he's this lighthouse that's not like, hey, this light is a warning, stay away. It's like, this light is the answer. Come on over here. And so when I met him in 2014 on the banks of the Grand Canyon, I'm like, you and I are fast friends. Next year, I'm over on the Zambezi, Steve Fisher, Eric Jackson, Benny, the whole crew, and we're paddling some real whitewater over there. And Lonnie B's not seeing any of it, but boy, is he ever a visionary, right? So yeah, that was an amazing time to be over there with those guys.
So what's I feel like even though they're very different sports, kayaking and climbing, when you're dealing with somebody who's disabled in whatever factor maybe they're blind or they're paralyzed, what's kind of is there an overlapping skill to kind of help them through these tasks? Is what have you learned from taking people into these kind of wild environments and giving them this experience?
I would say the number one thing is permission, right? So there's acknowledgement as well, right? So, and then there's gratitude. These are these three big things, right? There's okay, I'm going to acknowledge that there's need. Then I'm going to ask for permission if I can provide that need. And then I'm going to express gratitude for being able to provide that need, because I'm being nourished all the way through that entire line, right? So my big thing is, okay, I sense there's a need here. I'm going to come up and go, hey, I'm Timmy. What's your name? Hi. I was wondering if you may need help. For example, I was recently at the 5 Point Mountain Film Festival in Carbondale. And this guy I had met before, he's actually quadriplegic from the neck down. And there was a buffet in the VIP tent and we're eating. And I'm like, this guy's he's looking at the table. I didn't see anybody with him to help, attend and whatnot. So I'm like, hey man, food's good, huh? He's like, yeah, it looks good. I'm like, do you want help eating? He's like, really? I'm like, yeah. And then next thing you know, I'm doing this kind of intimate act of feeding a person. I don't know who they are, but it's just the dude needs to eat, right? It's the basic need. So next thing you know, we're fast friends, and it's it opens up conversation. It opens up the possibility, right, of providing all that stuff. But it starts with a question: can I help? And then everything's opened after that. But that's that big thing that you learn too, that's a really hard thing to do, is ask for help or ask somebody if they want help, because that's being vulnerable. They could say no, right? But if you can flex that, if you can get that conditioned, it's as important as any workout that might be happening right now, is working out that emotional and psychological side of how do we provide help? How do we ask for it? How do we acknowledge it?
No, it is so impressive what you and they do together. I mean, it's, I've done a little bit of kind of multi-pitch climbing, just for the example of climbing but I got 100 feet up and was pretty scared. I had my own kind of response to it of wow, I'm really high up. I'm being held by a what seems like a flimsy rope, even though I know it's not, it's scary. And then to have, throw a disability or something like that on top of that, it's incredible that you're able to get them excited about it, through it, accomplish it. The whole process is very admirable and super cool to me.
Well, and here's the deal: there's many, many stories. It's endless. That's just the thing. It's this is a deep well, right, from which to explore and do a deep dive in and learn about human nature and human connection and human resilience. But that's all via purpose. By accident, you may be aware of it, but when you lean in and do a deeper dive, then it's more purpose-driven, right? But flashing forward to the million stories that we could tell, I just worked on stage at Telluride Mountain Film with a dear friend, Quinn Brett, and her film, An Accidental Life. It explores the last 5 years of her life, especially just after and soon after she was injured in a fall in El Capitan where she broke her spine, right where my brother broke his spine at the T12, right about at your waist. Quinn's amazing. She'll always be amazing. She was amazing as a climber, and she's amazing as this e-bike, hand cyclist now. But we had this great conversation, Timmy, about inspiration, right? Because people all the time are like, that's so inspiring. And it is inspiring. It's crazy inspiring. But the problem can be when a person is saying you're inspirational, it's objectifying them a little bit. It sort of dehumanizes them. It turns them into a hallmark or a bumper sticker quote, right? So Quinn has this great idea, and I love it. That's why I want to share it with you and anybody that may be listening. If you're inspired by somebody, yes, tell them. But here's the key. Tell them what you're inspired to do. Tell them what you're inspired to change. Tell them what your inspiration is going to make you do that's active. Because that's what happens with a lot of these people who are like dealing with these adversities and adaptive needs, and it's freaking hard, but they're leaning in. And that is inspirational. But they get these DMs a lot. Hey, man, I just want you to know that you inspired me to do this thing. That's when those people feel it's not worth it to be paralyzed, not worth it to be visually impaired, but there's a sense of meaning that comes in through I'm inspired to do it, and I did it, and I love you, and boom.
That makes a lot of sense, and that's a great sentiment to give out to everyone here and myself. I mean, that I can only imagine how kind of not annoying, but like it must get tough sometimes just getting the inspirational every day, you know, like that's not what you need to hear. You want to hear about the change and the impact that it made on your life.
It's called inspiration porn, right? And that word at the end means like objectification, baseless, meaningless, hollow, horrific, right? And it's funny, you wouldn't think that inspiration can mean that, but it does when you're bombarded with, I just want to tell you. And it's like, no, tell me what you did with it. And I love Quinn coming back with that. I'm going to be using that forever.
Yeah, that's a great way to think about it, and just go about life in general. You know, not just telling you about how great it is, but here are the great things I'm going to do.
Here's what I did. By the way, you charged my batteries, you gave me the courage, and I'm back from it. And here's what I learned. And here's what I'm doing now. This person could be like, and I'm taking my inspiration and I'm doing a little slideshow at the grade school, and I'm going to go and volunteer at the farmer's market, you know, at this particular nonprofit. And I'm going to do these great things because, yes, these are great acts that we can do for ourselves, but the real great act is doing for others, right? That's what I found. It's like my best returns don't come when it's a small circle, but when I've dilated that thing out and the aperture's wide and there's a lot of light and love getting in, those are my best times. Those are my best exchanges.
For sure. And I think that's kind of a good segue to kind of talk about present day. You know, where are you today? What are you up to? Like what's keeping you motivated to keep climbing and keep doing everything that you do?
I would say the number one thing that motivates me is love. The second thing that motivates me is beauty. And the third thing that motivates me is joy, right? Love, beauty, and joy. Now you can apply those to anything, crocheting, mathematics, ornithology. It's infinite what you can apply those things for. But if you lead and find those things and then can create conduits to creating them and then you share them with others, again, that's the exchange, that shared purpose, the affirmation of mutual beneficence, reciprocity. So for me, it's always reading, love reading. Find a really deep satisfaction in not just accruing knowledge, but then applying it. I'm going to play music today at the farmer's market with a dear friend of mine, Robin Orr. Love you, Robin. And I'm going to sit down at the drums and play some music with this beautiful soul, right? This beautiful language. And then my wife, you know, she's this incredible individual, and I learned that I'm going to be a father, dude. What?
Woo, congratulations. That's awesome.
It's still theoretical. It's an away game. It's happening to her and not to me. It's her dealing with gestation and the first road trip. And then recently, that big change has surfaced. And then I just took another executive director job at a nonprofit. In the last 20 plus years, I've had one job, a conventional real job where it's like a W-4 and the whole thing. Everything else has been subcontract, free zone. But I took that executive director role at Paradox Sports to take it from volunteer to professional. I'm doing the same thing with the Yosemite Climbing Association. And that's an organization with a mandate that's around the preservation of the historical record around climbing culture as it pertains to Yosemite and the globe, really. And then our second mandate, parallel with that, is stewardship of the living record. And we have our 19th annual facelift, park-wide cleanup, thousands of hours, tens of thousands of pounds of trash. And we do our 19th annual. So under my stewardship, we're going from volunteer to professional. I'm the professionally paid executive director. I have Kareen Tarpinian as my events and partnership manager. We have our museum. We're doing it. So and then there's like 10 other things. Like, I'll never be bored. If I ever say I'm bored, that's a miracle, because there's so many things to do. How can you say that? Like, children say that because it seems infinite. But as I've aged, I realize time is very much of the essence. Yeah.
Well, congratulations on 2 of those. I mean, that's becoming a dad, new job. I mean, like, and being excited about all of it. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's great, dude. I feel stoked. I feel very, very lucky. I mean, 2 years ago, I had a stroke, right? I was down in Patagonia shooting a film, and suddenly I had this subarachnoid hemorrhage. And literally 50% of the people die right then. 50% that remain, they're often maimed for life, often. But I won every coin toss again and again and again. So this is bonus life, dude. I'm so pumped. And people are like, well, what did that cause you to want to change anything? I'm like, not really change, but just amplify and magnify, right? Do even more, share it even more, provide even more relief for myself, build my foundation real well, so I can reach out to other people and provide that relief and goodness to them. So keeping it going, Timmy.
That's a beautiful sentiment. And we're kind of up here, kind of near the end of the podcast, and the kind of last question I want to ask you is why, and particularly to everyone listening that's on a machine right now or that's working out, why spend a lifetime in the mountains? Why make a career out of this? What does it mean to you? Is there anything that you have to say about what the outdoors has done for you and why you should encourage people to get out there?
I was just talking about this with my wife, Sarah, as we were walking in the hills. We live in South Lake Tahoe, which is amazing, in the mountains. Very blessed to be here, of course, with a great community. But we're out walking in the Jeffrey pines and the ponderosa pines, and our dogs racing around, and there's these beautiful snow plants, these really fuchsia colored, strange plants coming out. Anyway, all that to simply say that I was born in a life of 7 kids, with 7 kids next door, 7 kids next door, row homes, manufactured, machine made, you're squeezed through the aperture of school. And then again, it's just convention. And then you get the job and you keep up with the Joneses. I was like, no. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go find wildness in the wilderness and listen to that. And I'm going to take cues from that. It's like nature RX, right? It is prescribed daily walks, daily meditations, where you just sit and listen to the birds, listen to the water go by. And you could actually do that on the Potomac, right, in DC. You could do that on the Schuylkill, right, in downtown Philly. You could do that on the East River, right in Manhattan, right? These places exist, and it's through intention that we go to them. So a life in the mountains, I can't picture another one. And that life in the mountains has given me the opportunity to do so much, right? Every opportunity I've had in my life has been as a result of being a climber who just cannot get enough of life, problem solving, leaning into the difficult things, teamwork, etc. There's no other life but a life in the mountains.
Awesome. That is, I think a lot of people, maybe a life in the outdoors for everyone, a life in the mountains for a lot of us. That was awesome. Thank you so much, Timmy. Any final words you want to send off? I don't know how you get better than what you just said, but.
I hope that we get a chance to hang out in person and maybe climb in Yosemite, dude. What do you think? Should we do an ascent of El Capitan?
I'm in. We can make a video about this. Sign me up.
Awesome, dude. All right. Well, great chatting with you, and thanks for your time as well.
Yeah. Thanks, Timmy.